Good morning. Welcome to the King's Report for May 12th, 2018, 9th year of Cheongi, 3rd month, and the 27th day by the heavenly calendar. Tim Miller sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung and let's get started with the weather. It's 48 degrees right now in the Cheongguk area, and it's raining. It's raining quite a bit, actually, and a very steady rain. And it's going to continue to rain for a while, maybe ending in 20 minutes, but throughout the day, though, there's going to be rain and a thunderstorm, and only getting up to 54 degrees today. And then tonight, cloudy and a little rain. So basically, today's forecast is rain. And tomorrow, Sunday, getting 63 degrees, a little bit warmer than today, and a morning shower. Probably a shower in the morning, but otherwise mostly cloudy. And then tomorrow night, cloudy and 50 degrees. So if you're going to do anything outdoors, I hope you did it yesterday. We had a pretty nice day yesterday. But today's, well, you can still go outdoors, but you're going to get wet, most likely. Okay, let's go into the news right away. I want to start today with some news that Oliver North has been making as the new president of the NRA. He was elected to that position on Monday, and he's hitting the ground running, as they say, and making a big splash. He had an interview that was published in the Washington Times on Wednesday that is causing some controversy. So let's go in and see what he actually said, or at least what the Washington Times reported that he said. Oliver North says 100 million Americans own guns, and that more of them need to join the National Rifle Association. I think, it says here that's already approaching 6 million, so 94 million to go. Yeah. Mr. North, a retired Marine Lieutenant Colonel, talk show host, and now the incoming president of the NRA, said his first goal will be to add 1 million people as fast as we can to the organization's membership, which is already at a record approaching 6 million. In an exclusive interview with the Washington Times, Mr. North described a challenging legal landscape for gun owners after former Supreme Court Justice John Paul Stevens suggested repealing the Second Amendment, and amid growing anti-gun propaganda in the wake of the Valentine's Day school shooting in Parkland, Florida. They can do all the cyber war against us. They're doing it. They can use the media against us. They are. They've gone after our bank accounts, our finances, our donors, and obviously individual members, Mr. North said. It's got to stop. And that's why the leadership invited me to become the next president of the NRA. The NRA announced Monday that Mr. North, already a board member, would take over as president, giving the organization one of the highest profile leaders in its nearly 150-year history. Observers said it couldn't be a coincidence coming just months after Parkland, which sparked renewed gun control efforts on Capitol Hill and in a number of state legislatures, and an increasingly nasty tone toward the NRA. Mr. North said the NRA is now the victim of civil terrorism, in quotes, after vandals splashed fake blood on the Virginia home of a top NRA official, and other opponents aimed personal threats at NRA leaders and members. They call them activists. That's what they're calling themselves. They're not activists. This is civil terrorism. This is the kind of thing that's never been seen against a civil rights organization in America, he said. You go back to the terrible days of Jim Crow and those kinds of things. Even there, you didn't have this kind of thing, he said. Why? We didn't have the cyber war kind of thing that we've got today. He said that contrary to claims from gun control activists, the shooting at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, which he labeled a travesty, a failure on the part of the local authorities and unfortunately the FBI as well, hasn't fundamentally changed the nature of the gun debate. He said the young survivor activists who have emerged as representatives for gun restrictions and as fierce opponents of the NRA are getting swept up by a broader propaganda machine. What they did very successfully with a frontal assault and now intimidation and harassment and lawbreaking is they confuse the American people, he said. Our job is to get this straight story out about what happened there and to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen again because the proper things are being done with the advocacy of the NRA. That begins, Mr. North said, with the NRA's School Shield security program, announced after the 2012 school shooting in Newton, Connecticut, as an example of how the group is helping schools take steps to prevent massacres. I attended a seminar on the school shooting, on the School Shield program, and I was very impressed by it. The seminar that I attended was part of the NRA convention in Dallas last weekend. After the NRA's defiant post-Parkland response, which included suing the state of Florida over the new age restrictions for certain rifles, some corporations ended their NRA member discounts. Investment firms and banks are also re-examining whether they want to have any ties to gun companies. In March, Citibank announced that it would work with retail clients only if they required background checks for gun purchases and didn't sell to people younger than 21. Bank of America announced recently it would be backing away from clients that sell semi-automatic firearms. And nearly all firearms are semi-automatic. The ones that are not, bolt-action rifles and so forth are not semi-automatic. But the vast majority of firearms are, in fact, semi-automatic. To counterpunch, Mr. North said he plans to recruit new members from his connections in the U.S. Armed Forces, as well as viewers and people he has interviewed for his longtime War Stories documentary show on Fox News. He said the 23 million veterans and family members in the country is a pretty big base. Yeah, 23 million. That's a pretty big base, yeah. My job is to motivate, inspire, encourage, and tell the truth, he said, though he acknowledged that some would-be political allies are treading carefully after the Parkland shooting. There are people running in fear from what happened down in Parkland, thinking that the NRA is on its heels. It's not, he said. What we have to do is assure them that being associated with the NRA is a good thing for their re-election chances. It's a positive thing. Gun control groups have derided NRA board's decision to turn to Mr. North, saying it's a thinly veiled ploy for publicity in the face of plummeting popularity. Yeah, and on this comment where he says that what we have to do is assure them being associated with the NRA is a good thing for their re-election chances. It's a positive thing. Here in Pennsylvania, in the 8th District, where Chunnigung is located, we have a man running for Congress. He's running right now, trying to become the Republican nominee for that position. His name is John Trin, and he is presenting himself as a lifetime member of the NRA. So we hope that Oliver North's point here can be made if he can win that primary on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, and then the election in November. Let's see, Mr. North rejected that and pushed back against activists who chided him over his role in the Iran-Contra affair, which made him a public figure and then a major star in the conservative movement. He was accused of selling weapons illegally to Iran and then moving that money to the Contras, a U.S.-backed rebel group seeking to overthrow Nicaragua's communist regime. He was convicted of 3 felonies related to obstruction of justice and reporting gifts, but they were vacated by a court over irregularities in the testimony against him and eventually dropped by prosecutors. All right, so eventually he was convicted, but that conviction was vacated. It was vacated. They can say whatever they want. It's ancient history, Mr. North said. Yeah, this was back in the 1980s. This is back in the 1980s. What is that? About almost 30 years ago. No, more than 30 years ago. 35 years ago. My reply is I did my duty for Ronald Reagan, just like I did it for every president since I was in the Marine Corps starting in 1961. Mr. North also waved aside comparisons to actor Charlton Heston, who was tapped to lead the NRA during the late 1990s during another period when the influence of the group was being questioned. I don't want to be Charlton Heston. He was Moses. I'm a U.S. Marine and I love Moses, and he was magnificent, said Mr. North, who recalled grousing about bringing Mr. Heston to save the group. Maybe he did. He said, I don't think I have to save the NRA. I want to increase the size of the NRA. So that was his interview in the Washington Times. And, he's a great person to have at the head of the NRA at any time, I would think, but especially now. He's a man who really proved his, he really proved himself during the Iran-Contra affair, and I followed him closely then, and he attended a number of events sponsored by the Washington Times and our True Father, and he was obviously still close to the Washington Times. He gave this interview. It was published Wednesday, so he must have given it Monday or Tuesday, right after he was elected to the post of president of the NRA. But then some of the things that he said here, when he said that some, and I think it's pretty clear that he's saying that people who do terroristic things are terrorists. I think that's pretty obviously what he says. But of course, the liberal media intentionally misunderstood and misinterpreted what he said, and is using it to attack him and the NRA. So let's see what the New York Times reported about the statements that NRA President Oliver North made in the Washington Times interview. This is May 11th. This is in yesterday's was published. Oliver North, the incoming president of the National Rifle Association, said this week the gun rights group was a victim of civil terrorism and accused gun control activists of intimidation and harassment and law-breaking. So Oliver North was just speaking about some gun control activists who were doing these things, but the New York Times immediately spreads it to all gun control activists, so as to create controversy and to create basically what is fake news, and to sell more copies with this. And this is why President Trump refers to the New York Times as the failing New York Times. This is what they're resorting to. So now several of the students who survived the Valentine's Day shooting at the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, are pushing back. He's just continuing to spread fear. He's definitely, well, who's continuing to spread fear? Isn't it the New York Times? By intentionally misunderstanding or intentionally misquoting Oliver North? Aren't they the ones who are continuing to spread fear? He's definitely a good fit for his new job. Ryan Deitch, senior at the school, said in an interview during his lunch period on Friday. So the New York Times, after Oliver North gave an interview, went down to Florida and went into the lunchroom of this high school and found themselves a guy who would give them a kind of quote that they wanted to in the lunchroom. Mr. Deitch said he wants to sit down and speak with Mr. North to understand his perspective. Well, okay, that's good. But he expressed a frustration that with their criticism of gun control activists, Mr. North and the NRA seemed more focused on attacking the speaker and not the speech. Well, that's what he can say if he once the New York Times fed him the wrong information. Did this senior in high school actually read the Washington Times interview, or did he simply take what the New York Times reporter was telling him about the Washington Times interview? I suspect the latter is the case. Mr. North, infamous for his role in the Iran-Contra affair in the 1980s, in some cases I would say respected for his role in the Iran-Contra affair in the 1980s. I respect him for that role. I made the remarks in a broad interview with the Washington Times published on Wednesday. He was named incoming president of the NRA on Monday. In the interview, Mr. North, a former Marine Corps lieutenant colonel, drew a comparison between the backlash to the NRA and the ignominies of the Jim Crow era. This is civil terrorism, he told the Washington Times, reportedly in reference to activism splashing fake blood on the home of an NRA official. This is the kind of thing that's never been seen against a civil rights organization in America. You go back to the terrible days of Jim Crow and those kinds of things, even there you didn't have this kind of thing, he said. Well, he wasn't just talking about splashing blood, was he? He was talking about cyber terrorism. against the NRA and the media onslaught against the NRA. So he was talking about the whole broad things, and he said you didn't have that kind of cyber terrorism in the Jim Crow era. During the Jim Crow era, many states and cities passed laws that institutionalized racial discrimination and segregation. Lynchings were common. Civil rights activists were beaten and killed. The comments elicited a strong rebuke from Fred Guttenberg, whose 14-year-old daughter, Jamie, was among those killed in Parkland. We'll end your reign of terror and we'll pass common sense gun safety in this country. Your remarks sound like the remarks of a lobby that has already lost the argument, and so you attack us, he said in a series of tweets. That sentiment was echoed by several students at the school, many of whom, like Mr. Leach, have become outspoken proponents of gun control since the shooting. Never knew that not wanting to die by being shot by an AR-15 in my classroom was considered terrorism. Come on, that's not what Oliver North said. Lauren Hogg, a Stoneman Douglas student, said on Twitter, "Thanks, NRA, now I know." Another student, Cameron Caskey, said, "Go ahead, North. It speaks so beautifully for the NRA's true colors that they put this crook in charge." He's not a crook, right? He's not a crook. Mr. Caskey appeared to be referring to the 3 crimes Mr. North was convicted of, but then the convictions were vacated, right? In 1989 for his role in the Iran-Contra scandal, in which the Reagan administration used funds from the secret sale of arms to Iran to air rebel forces in Nicaragua, anti-communist forces in Nicaragua. The convictions were reversed in 1991. See? So, in the Wednesday interview, Mr. North, a former Fox News contributor, addressing the Parkland shooting, calling it a travesty and blaming it on a failure among local authorities in the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He also suggested that the student survivors had been swept up by anti-gun propaganda. Well, they have, yeah. What they did very successfully with a frontal assault and now intimidation and harassment and law-breaking is they confused the American people, he told the Washington Times. Our job is to get the story straight out, get the straight story out about what happened there, and to make sure that kind of thing doesn't happen again, because the proper things are being done with the advocacy of the NRA. The NRA did not immediately respond to requests for comment. They didn't mention the School Shield program that the NRA is doing, which I was very impressed with when I attended their seminar in Dallas. This was actually a seminar by 4 panelists, and one of the panelists had gone through a lot of data to see what was the most effective thing. What was the thing that the schools could do to prevent this kind of thing? And he said, if you're only going to do one thing, then having an armed police officer on campus, in other words, what they call a school resource officer, having an armed police officer on campus, he says, reduces the body count by 70%. 70%. You can do just by that one thing. Be nice if media such as the New York Times would mention that, so that more schools could understand this and could protect their children in that way. We'll be getting into other stories about gun control or guns, school safety later on, but that was the point that was made very effectively, I think, at the NRA convention. All right, let's take a break right now, and we'll come back after this with more news about the NRA not gun control, but gun rights and other news from a Chonigu perspective.
Hi there, folks, and look at what I've got here today. My God, take a look at this. This is a BFR in 454 Casull with an octagonal barrel, magna porting, micarta grips. And look at that, it even has my initials on it, JM. Look at that thing of beauty, my God. Pop open the cartridge insertion door, and look at that cylinder spin. The finest revolvers in the world. That's a cannon. That's a cannon. Oh, man. Pretty accurate, though. That's our target. Oh, boy. Massive recoil.
Car Arms, Magnum Research, and Auto Ordnance. The Car Firearms Group. With a diverse product line that blends American craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. It's no secret why gun enthusiasts choose Car Firearms Group. From the Desert Eagle and Baby Desert Eagle made famous by Hollywood. The history of the 1911 and the Tommy gun. To the best in compact concealed carry. Car Firearms Group is not only the first name in personal defense, it's a name that has earned the respect of gun enthusiasts around the world. Concealment, innovative technology, value, accuracy, and history. Car Firearms Group. Made in the USA. Visit car.com today.
Welcome back to the King's Report for May 12th, 2018. Tim Elder sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Jin-moon. And during the previous segment, we gave you the Washington Times interview with Oliver North, and then the New York Times distortion of that interview. And it's New York Times' comments from some of the people in Parkland, Florida high school based on their distortion. And then now we have also Oliver North coming back after that. He gave an interview to NRA TV where he responded to the New York Times and other left-wing media about their distortion of his comments to the Washington Times. So let's watch that NRA TV segment with Oliver North. Go ahead and play the video, please.
Happy Friday, everyone. We've got the freshly installed new president of the NRA, Oliver North, joining us at the top of the show. Plus, David Limbaugh on Madeleine Albright's lack of self-awareness. Chuck Holton and I will discuss the crime rates in Dallas during the NRA annual meetings. If you want to take a guess as to how much they've decreased, we'll play that game. I'll also keep you up to date on news out of Oklahoma on constitutional carry and much, much more. We're live from Dallas this Friday. This is Relentless. The new NRA NRA President Oliver North has started his tenure out with some brutal honesty that is making headlines and really aggravating the anti-gun lobby. In an interview with the Washington Times while discussing vandals who like to vandalize homes of law-abiding gun owners, as well as threats made against NRA members and leaders, President Oliver North said this, quote, "They're not activists. This is civil terrorism. This is the kind of thing that's never been seen against a civil rights organization in America," end quote. Now, of course, the headlines from shrieking progressives and legacy media outlets fail to mention he's referring to the anti-gun fanatics that pull these stunts. But instead, they're pretending that North has described all opponents of the NRA as terrorists. So basically, the media is off to a great start at doing what they do, creating narratives to support their agenda. Oliver North has graciously joined our show today. He's been very busy. He's been all over the place to talk about his new role and what welcome from the press in anti-gun progressives has been like. It's so good to see you. Sir, thank you so much for joining us. So congratulations on the announcement.
Thank you,
This is
Dana.
good news. And I know Wayne LaPierre has said there could not be a better appointment for this time. People haven't been this excited since the days of Chuck Heston. What has been the reaction so far?
Well, some of it's just exactly what you just described, and some of that's coming from the propaganda ministry of the far left. You know, in respect for all, because I spent the last 17 years of my life as a member of the media. I tried very hard when I was covering American soldiers, sailors, airmen, guardsmen, Marines, tens of thousands of them over the last 17 years, to get the story straight. I joke about it by saying, I try not to shoot myself in the foot before I put my foot in my mouth. And apparently that's impossible for the far left. The attack on me, which quite frankly, I got pretty thick hide, I can handle that. But it's the consequence of using information to attack an opponent. It's called propaganda. And propaganda is being worked against the NRA almost every day in the mainstream media. And the inquiry, of course, comes from the New York Times. Apparently, in the blogosphere, all of that story got spun up as a consequence of intentionally misunderstanding what I was talking about with a columnist for the Washington Times. Here's what I was talking about. There are attacks going on. They are personal. There are legal attacks, financial attacks, digital, and actual harassment, physical harassment, and vandalism being perpetrated against members of the NRA, against board members, against officials of the organization. And what I find that to be is civil terrorism. Now, I never said a thing about the kids at Parkland. What has happened now is they've used those words to create their own, as you put it, narrative. What's being waged against this great institution over the past 2 months are without precedent in this country. We know what it's like to be criticized. We know what it's like to be verbally attacked. But the kinds of attacks that are being waged right now, and the people doing it, call themselves activists. If one looks at the Washington Post story about what happened to one of our senior officials and his wife right here in Virginia, ought to put everybody at pause. It's illegal to break into someone's domicile or their business. It's illegal to commit vandalism. It is illegal to threaten people. And it's illegal to swat people calling in a false police report. All those kinds of things have been happening over the course of the last several months. And I can only conclude, because I did spend a good bit of my time in and around the U.S. military, this is the kind of attack that was pre-planned. They didn't know it was going to be Parkland. They simply took advantage of it. And by they, I'm talking about the people who want to destroy the Second Amendment and this institution which protects it.
You know, one of the themes that I've heard over and over again, just coming out of the NRA annual meetings last weekend, was how law-abiding gun owners shouldn't be ashamed to either be members of the NRA or to simply be law-abiding gun owners and want to protect themselves and their families. And that's sort of the cultural campaign that has been also waged against gun owners and against the NRA. It's this campaign of shame, as though they're trying to shame individuals for wanting to defend themselves. How do you propose to combat this cultural warfare?
Well, I've kind of given away my strategy here, which a good leader is not supposed to do, but I think it's appropriate in this case. You know, look, the bottom line of what we have to do, we've got 100 million firearms owners in America. It's taken us from 1871 till now to get to 6 million. And so my job, my mission, as the president of the National Rifle Association, is to gain another 1 million members just as soon as we possibly can. And I don't think that ought to be that hard. Because if you think of this, I've spent the last 17 years of my life, my only beat was soldiers, sailors, airmen, guards, Marines, and law enforcement. That totals about 23 million people if you count the active duty, their family members, the reserve, and the retired in the military and their family members. 23 million, my guess is a good bit of that 100 million that own firearms are people in that, if you will, cohort. And my goal is to go out there and let them know this Marine is still on their side. What I want them to do is join us in this fight. And it is a fight. It's not righteous. It's not just. It's evil to attack the way they've been doing it. And it has nothing to do with the kids out of Parkland. In fact, in every broadcast I did about the Parkland incident, or travesty as I put it, every one of those interviews, whether it was in print or broadcast, I commended the heroes. I mean, think about these youngsters who were in the junior ROTC, one of whom was killed, others were wounded, who threw themselves in front of the perpetrators. The perpetrator in this event deserved the accolade of hero. I know heroes when I keep company with them. Those are heroes, and that's what we ought to be doing more of. We certainly commended them. What we ought to do is make sure that those heroes know that we're on their side when it comes to this fight. And going after the NRA is not the answer. Not the answer for those that have organized this fight. It's not the answer for our country.
It's a cultural fight, and also it's turning into a financial fight, as a number of institutions, we've been talking about Bank of America here on this program, Wells Fargo, banks that enjoy taxpayer-funded bailouts, but then years later have decided to turn around and discriminate against those very taxpayers that bailed them out and made them, continue to make them sustainable by discriminating against them simply because they choose the method of which they've chosen to protect themselves and their families. What would you have NRA members do in response to this? Are we at the point where we're now looking at perhaps maybe a boycott of these institutions?
Look, here's my answer to that one. What you need to do, every one of us knows somebody who's not in the NRA. JoinNRA.org is where they need to go on the internet, not to one of these blog sites. Join NRA and recruit somebody who's not in. The whole thing of our military is depending on logistics and recruiting. We wouldn't have a military today if you didn't have logisticians and recruiters. Our job is to become recruiters. Our job is to become logisticians. We need to go out and find those who've walked away from us. They're gone. If they want to stay away, that's fine. We'll find replacements for all of those. You and I were both there with 87,000 plus down in Dallas. You and I know what it looks like because there were supposedly going to be big holes all over that trade show floor. I didn't see any, did you?
No, I didn't see any either.
Others have left. Yeah.
Exactly. No, exactly. I didn't see any either. And from what I hear, it was also, there was a huge reduction in crime as well, which I'm going to get into later in the program because of the annual meetings. You know,
exactly.
I've heard a lot of people say that with you as president of the NRA now, that this could not have come at a better time just because the organization is dealing with, as you had mentioned before, some unprecedented just unprecedented, for the lack of a better way to put it, attacks, not just from elected officials, but also from these huge, very well-funded advocacy groups whose organizational structure is quite opposite to that of the NRA, which, and there have been reams written about this, the NRA subsists on really, I mean, just everyday Americans who are coming together to fellowship, and they donate, and their memberships, that's where it comes from. We're not, you know, the Michael Bloombergs of New York that can just, with their billions, fund everything. When it seems as though you got a hill ahead of you. How are you acclimating to this? Because this is the new fight, the biggest fight, and you go from one area of service to another.
Well, Dana, I'm a Marine. I spent my life with those who relish a good, fair fight. That we bring about the proper mission, the proper goals, and you accomplish the mission. I think we can do that. I'm also convinced that we can indeed bring in a lot of military folks who have not been in it before. They're either former military, active duty, family members, and those are retirees. I look at that as an incredible resource for this country. I'm the one who proposed way back when we first started talking about School Shield. I proposed that what we do is we take military personnel who have already learned the safe handling of firearms and officers who are retired from law enforcement and bring them back in as school resources officers to protect kids. I mean, part of the big lie of the big propaganda is that we're somehow to blame for what happens when a shooting event like today happens out in California. And the reality of it is the NRA isn't to blame. The NRA has offered solutions to it. And I would submit that if there were more schools that had the kinds of programs we've advocated under School Shield, there'd be a whole lot fewer of these kinds of incidents. And it's, when you think about it, common sense.
Yeah, very much so, common sense. One other quick issue I want to ask you about as well, in Oklahoma, and we're seeing this fight transfer from being a federal fight. Normally, that's how anti-gun advocates have always taken it. Yeah. They've tried to enact federal gun control, any kind of gun restrictions on the federal level. Now they're getting a little bit smarter in their strategy. Now they decided to go state by state, locality by locality. One of those areas that they're really focusing a lot of firepower, as it were, on is Oklahoma right now, where Governor Mary Phelan is considering signing constitutional carry. She can either sign it. It was passed by the state legislature. Oklahomans, want it. These are the people that they elected to represent them. This is what was passed. Or she could choose to veto it, as Everytown and the New York-based groups are hoping that she does. What words would you have for Governor Mary Phelan of Oklahoma on this issue?
Press on. Press on. I mean, what we ought to be having is a national reciprocity. When I left Texas, I had to give up my firearm because I was going to places where it's not reciprocal. All the time that I lived in Virginia and worked in the District of Columbia as a broadcaster. Every time I had to leave my firearm at home. That's something that does not protect anybody. I mean, a law-abiding citizen who's passed all the hoops and hurdles that they've got to go through to get a concealed carry permit in most states ought to be able to carry just about anywhere. And if you do the right thing getting on and off an airplane, as I do when I go hunting, what's wrong with that? I look at those kinds of restrictions that we've placed and trying to, I suppose it protects some politicians from some of their constituents, because those politicians don't believe that there's enough God-fearing, law-abiding members of the NRA in their constituency. Part of my goal here in this recruitment of 100 million, by the way, that website again is joinnra.org. Don't let me forget that. Part of the reason to do that is to reinforce the idea that we've got law officers and people who believe in the Second Amendment who will be able to back a congressman or a senator or a member of the local state legislature or their governors and attorney generals in doing the right thing. Look what just happened to the Attorney General of New York, who is taking the NRA to court on at least a half dozen, maybe a dozen different cases, trying to do in the organization. That's why I say it's partially a legal fight. Let's see, where's he at now? Oh, he's out of work. He's out of work because he couldn't keep his pants up. I mean, you think about the difference between the people we respect and admire and what was being done to us by that Attorney General who's now out of a job.
Yes, and I know that there are more lawsuits regarding New York to come, which we're going to be talking about within the next week, definitely. Last quick question for you, sir. Aside from making sure that we are all working together as a unit because there is strength in numbers, what is the biggest hurdle for the Second Amendment movement in America today?
Is helping Americans understand that the vow to protect the entire Constitution that I took, every law officer takes, every politician takes, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to bear true faith and allegiance to same, ends with the words, "So help me God." It's about the entire Constitution, not just some of it. The words "except for" are not part of that promise, nor should they ever be.
Absolutely. Sir, good. So good to see you. Retired Lieutenant Colonel Oliver North. We're President North now. We're referring to you as President North.
She goes on to other topics, including the drop in the crime rate in Dallas during the recent NRA convention. Well, you could pretty much expect that. You have all these people running around there with guns. You can expect that the criminals would go to some other city during that time, or maybe just take a vacation somewhere during that time. When I checked into my motel there in Dallas, actually we went a little bit farther out, about half an hour or so out of Dallas, in order to get a cheaper rate. And so we were not in one of the main NRA hotels. But as I was checking in, the person was asking us, why we were, just sort of doing in the course of conversation, why we were in the area. And I mentioned that I was there to attend the NRA convention. And immediately she started explaining to me about the safe in the room where I could keep my firearm if I needed to. So immediately I'd say I'm attending the NRA convention. The assumption was that, okay, this person has a firearm on him. So, which was true, because there is reciprocity between Pennsylvania and Texas. I was able to take my firearm. Just because we drove through, I had to lock it up during the short distance that we were in Maryland, but otherwise, West Virginia, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Texas all had reciprocity, so I was able to carry my firearm throughout the entire distance, with the exception of that small portion that we were going through Maryland. And but that kind of national reciprocity needs to come into effect as quickly as possible, as Oliver North just mentioned during that interview. And that national reciprocity legislation was passed by the House, but then it has been languishing, or maybe it's already been killed, basically, pretty much in the Senate. It has to be revived, though, so that President Trump can receive it, and then he can sign it. The omnibus spending bill contained the Fix NICS bill, although that has pretty much nothing to do with spending. Fix NICS was the bill that would make it would make it easier for people to wind up on the list of people that are not allowed to own firearms. Every time we buy a firearm, there's a background check that we go through, and there's a list of there's a database with a list of people who are not allowed to buy or own firearms. And so when I bought my firearm, my name was checked to see if it was on that database, and it's not, and so I was able to buy. But this Fix NICS bill makes it easier for people to wind up on that list, and a lot of people who don't deserve to be on that list will wind up on that list. And the list, by the way, is not really effective in preventing actual gun violence, which the left hates so much, because most of the people who are first of all, most of the people who are denied permission to buy a firearm are able to appeal that, and then are able to get that overturned. And also, the people who commit gun violence, who commit crimes with guns, often are able to pass that inspection, are able to buy a firearm, and then they go out and commit a crime, despite this background check. So background check is not effective. It's not effective in preventing gun crime. That's been shown over and over again. And so, but what it does, though, is that it makes it more difficult for law-abiding citizens to purchase firearms to protect themselves and their families and those around them. So that fixed NICS was passed, but what we really needed, though, was the national reciprocity, and that was very pointedly left out of the omnibus bill. President Reagan recently, in speaking, I keep saying President Reagan, President Trump recently speaking at the NRA convention, reiterated his support for a Second Amendment, although after the Parkland, Florida incident, that travesty, as Oliver North called it, I've sometimes called it a massacre. After that incident, President Trump, got to put a note here, a sticky note here. Current president is Donald J. Trump. There you go. Me and Nancy Pelosi, we can't figure out who's president of the United States right now. President Trump seemed to be pretty sort of wobbly on the Second Amendment after that incident. Not really sure where he is now. I hope he's back, but not really sure if he's the kind of businessman who just follows the market wherever it goes. And if the market moves to the left, then he's going to go to the left with it. I hope that's not the case. I was a little bit worried with him after the Parkland, Florida incident. But he needs to support the national reciprocity. He also said some negative things about national reciprocity. So he's saying, oh, that's never going to pass, that kind of thing. Oh, that doesn't have the political support, or so, that kind of thing. So he needs to get on board with that, because it's essential for us to have that so that we can carry our firearms wherever we go. Especially, across the river there to New York and New Jersey. All right. Right now, I have some other sort of gun rights related stories that I want to cover, but I have a person coming in, and he'll be here in just a few minutes, that I want to discuss this with. So let's wait a minute. Wait perhaps until the next hour before we get into that. Let's go through the headlines right now, and maybe that will bring us up to the hour where we can have our REMA, and then go back into gun rights after 6 o'clock in the second hour. Here on Drudge Report, on the upper left hand, still talking about the Mueller investigation. Americans in general are really caring less and less and less and less and less about this whole thing. It's been going on for, how many months now? 15, 16 months or something like that. And so little has come out of it. And what does come out of it is obviously not related to collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, which was what this was supposed to be about. And so basically, we're getting a life. People in Washington need to get a life as well. Just Mr. Mueller, get a life, is what I think majority of Americans are saying about this now. Anyway, Mueller is still continuing to fulfill his role of harassing the president, President Trump, and harassing the president and making it difficult for him to do his job, which is what the Democrats wanted him to do in the first place. He asked Ford for records after it rejected Michael Cohen consulting overture. AT&T CEO says hiring president's lawyer was a big mistake. Other allies hit up. Comey plays Toronto, as we talked about these yesterday, I think, where Comey was in Toronto and he was saying nasty things about the president and his country in that foreign country. Wall Street Journal about that FBI source. Lawmakers weigh Plan B to protect Mueller's work. Watergate hangover still tormenting liberals. Maxine Waters explodes on the House floor. I resent Make America Great Again. Of course she would. Gonzalez, the real questions and dangers of criminally charging the president. A poll, Trump approval is 49%. So despite this daily barrage by the media against the president, his approval rating is about 49%, which is about where Obama was. In fact, sometimes it's higher than where Obama was at this time in his presidency. Obama had a press that was just praising him all the time. Near the end of his presidency, his people were saying, "Oh, look, we had a presidency with no scandals." Well, of course there were no scandals. The media was covering up for you for 8 years. But despite that drastic difference in coverage of the two presidents, the public support for President Trump is about the same or slightly above where Obama was at this time in his presidency. Wow, that's news. McCain's long goodbye. Yes, McCain is currently battling cancer, and it looks pretty obvious that he's not going to be returning to Washington. He's in Arizona now, but from Arizona, he's still throwing artillery shells or figurative artillery shells at the president, and, for example, disinviting him from his funeral and other things like that. Der Spiegel, Europe joins the resistance. I'm not sure what that means because I thought Europe was in the resistance all along. Gasoline prices could see summer spike with prices at 4-year highs and record demand. Woman claiming to be princess menaces Saudi embassy. City launches controversial program watching public social media posts. There you go, yeah. These left-wing fascists are doing that now. And Miami man made nearly 100 million robocalls. Now he's paying a big price, $120 million. Story of doomed love, Cold War, wows Khan. Gay cinema comes of age at Milestone Festival. I'm not sure anyone pays attention to Cannes Festival anymore, but anyway, solo Star Wars story premieres earns mixed reactions. Snapped. Naked man tells deputies he planted bomb at Daytona Beach Airport. A naked man did that. Inside the Austin bomber's life, questions of friends, faith, and sexuality. All right, it must be a slow news day. Drudge Report has all sorts of headlines that don't seem to be very important. Anti-McCain comments sparked bipartisan uproar. And tsunami warning accidentally broadcast on Alaska TV and radio. Feds collect record taxes. Yes. Dems ponder how to run against improving economy. Of course, they're saying it's all Obama, crediting Obama with that. Middle East is tense. Palestinians throw grenades and explosives at troops on the Gaza border. And a cleric threatens destruction of Israeli cities. Saudis bid to match Iran by enriching uranium, and popularity of Netanyahu rises. We're looking at the situation in the Middle East because Iran and Israel now are launching missiles at each other. No full-scale war has erupted yet of the kind that we've seen previously in the Middle East, but that could happen at any time. Jewish gangsta rapper takes on Germany's hip-hop scene. Horrific London acid attack in broad daylight. There you go. So London, with all their gun control, they celebrate that, we've had gun control for more than 100 years. All right, but, you've got people knifing each other. You've got people throwing acid at each other. Why don't you give people the tools with which to defend themselves? This is a God-given right. People deserve to be able to own the tools and the best tools with which to defend themselves, such as an AR-15. People in Britain aren't allowed to do that, or at least to be able to carry around a handgun. So they have to live with that kind of thing. The mayor, Sadiq Khan, is now fighting fast food. Wow, yeah, that'll get him. Finland's female-only island slated to open amid controversy. Okay. The Iowa boarding school director is sentenced to 9 years for abuse. Foul smell leads investigators to home with 60 dead cats. Musk unveils video of first underground LA tunnel. Predicts rides in months. Fog of Benadryl blamed after man beats mom to death. That's possible. Those drugs will do stuff to you. 78-foot wave sets Southern Hemisphere record. Starbucks, bathrooms for all. Hi, Jack. Jack Harris joining us now. Yeah. Welcome.
Always, Tim.
Okay. And we'll be introducing Jack Harris during the next hour. Let's continue with the headlines now. And Starbucks bathrooms for all. They had that situation in Philadelphia where two people, you think, wanting to use the bathrooms were not allowed to and kicked out. And their skin color apparently was an issue. And so now Starbucks has just said, okay, we're going to open up our bathrooms for everyone. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to do anything. Whether you're white, brown, black, red, whatever, you can just come in and use our bathrooms. A coffee shop will leave Duke amid strife over rap music complaint. Oprah tells grass to fight hysteria that has gripped politics. Your job is not who you are, she says. Hawaii, having problems with that erupting volcano, is pleading for visitors to keep their travel plans. Says, hey, we've got lots of other islands. Just because the biggest one is blowing up doesn't mean you can't go to the other ones. Braces for worse lava flows from erupting volcano. And the residents are shaken by the tremors there. Philippines plans pollution-free city larger than Manhattan. In the Philippines, all right. Apple made more profit in 3 months than Amazon has generated during its lifetime. Inside a powerful Silicon Valley charity, a toxic culture festered. In nightmares, woman sends 65,000 texts to a man after their first date. And debt may force the Lincoln Library to sell its artifacts. Yeah. China rapidly building space weapons. And China, has been talking about building a base on the dark side or the back side of the moon, where I think they were talking about growing flowers there or something like that, some ridiculous thing. But yeah, it's all military. It's all military. And there's a new law in Kansas. The cops are not allowed to have sex during traffic stops.
There you go when you can get it.
Okay. In Cuba, the great American tourism boom goes bust. I think that's an unnecessary law. I think there's probably already a law against that. Anyway, let's go to break now, and we'll come back. We'll do our REMA, and then we'll be joined by our guest today, Mr. Jack Harris. See you in about 5 minutes. 18. I'm Tim Elder, sitting in now with Jack Harris for the Second King of Cheongguk. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you very much, Tim.
Thank you for joining me in this early morning hour. Yeah.
Very, very, very excited to be here. Very honored to be here.
Oh, thank you. And we always do I always do the Rima at 6 o'clock so that people can find it in the video later on. Mm-hmm. And so I want to go to Ezekiel chapter 25, and then we'll read a little bit from Chun Song-gyong, and then after that, we'll be going into stuff about the gun rights and other things with Jack. In Ezekiel 25, the word of the Lord came again unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against the Ammonites, and prophesy against them, and say unto the Ammonites, Hear the word of the Lord God. Thus saith the Lord God, because thou saidst, Aha, against my sanctuary when it was profaned, and against the land of Israel when it was desolate, and against the house of Judah when they went into captivity. Behold, therefore, I will deliver thee to the men of the east for a possession, and they shall set their palaces in thee, and make their dwellings in thee, and shall eat thy fruit, and shall drink thy milk. And I will make Rabbah a stable for camels, and the Ammonites a couching place for flocks. And ye shall know that I am the Lord. So when God sets his eyes on making people meting out punishment, he doesn't fool around. He shows, hey, I am the Lord, and I'm going to show you how powerful I am. But he does that so that people can believe, and people can know that God exists, and that He is a power in the world, and so that people can then repent and come to Him. So that is out of His love that He passes judgment. I think it's important to always remember that it is love that motivates God in His judgment. And I want to go quickly to the Chun Song-gyong this morning because we have a very interesting passage from one of Father's addresses here. He says, I'm in page 1932 of the electronic edition of the Chun Song-gyong, and this is the chapter on the Pan-Pacific Providence, chapter 3. In 1945, when World War II came to an end, world Christianity was at an extremely important point in the history of God's providence of salvation. Christian nations like Great Britain, the United States, and France were in the central positions of the providence of that time. In World Wars I and II, the three major Christian nations of Great Britain, the United States, and France fought for democracy as the center of allied nations. It was God's desire to see the three major Christian nations join their forces to practice God's love in the service of humankind, with a sacrificial and serving spirit to actualize world peace without lapsing into nationalistic ideas centered on their countries. So Father lists them as Britain, the United States, and France. And when Father makes a list like that, the order of the list is very important. The most important one comes first, and they're listed in the order of importance. So in Father's understanding at the end of World War II is Britain, the United States, and France. In Korean, he would always say Young, Mi, Pur. Young being Britain, Mi being United States, and Pur meaning was an abbreviation for France. So Britain, the United States, and France were to be the central Christian nations in the providence at that time. And he often said that the United Nations should have been formed only by those nations and other Christian nations. But unfortunately, FDR, I'm not FDR, but FDR too, even though he was already dead at the time that the United Nations was formed, but Truman, who succeeded him, and basically Truman had pretty much the same staff as FDR left for him, and Britain and France also allowed the Soviet Union to come in, and even bringing in China was okay because at that time it was nationalist China. It was this was before just before China, the Communist Party was taking over China, and the Nationalist Party was still nominally, at least, in charge of China, and they were the part of the Allied forces that defeated Japan in the Pacific during World War II. And so China also was given a seat on the Security Council, the permanent member seat of the Security Council. Unfortunately, 25, 30 years later, in the early 1970s, the Communist China, the Communist Party of China, inherited that seat. And so then you had the Soviet Union and China, two communist countries on the as permanent members of the Security Council. Along with the United States, Britain, and France. And these five countries in the United Nations wield almost absolute power because basically nothing happens in the United Nations unless nothing important anyway, nothing really important happens in the United Nations without the support of these five countries. There are more countries on the Security Council, but they are rotating members of the Security Council. And it's these five countries that have permanent seats on the Security Council, and they all each of them has a veto power of veto. So any one of them can veto pretty much anything. When a new Secretary General is chosen, for example, any one of these five countries can veto any candidate. They all have to approve of a new Secretary General, which is why you always have a pretty weak person. You never have a person from any of the five countries, for one thing. You always have a person from a sort of a third-tier country. Pan Ki-moon was that way, and also the current Secretary General Gutierrez I think is from Portugal, is that way. And always you have people from that kind of situation. So, but if Christianity could have, if the Christian nations, as Father says, Britain, U.S., and France, had come together and said, okay, we are going to lead the world. We are going to lead the world. We're not going to let in Soviet Union. We are going to lead the world, and based on Judeo-Christian principles. Then that would have been a very great thing for the providence, and it would have been really a momentous thing for God's providence of salvation. And Father says that if he had been able to connect with that, then he could have established Tony Cook in just 7 years, between 1945 and 1952. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. And of course, we all know the various difficulties that came about as a result of that. It was God's desire to see the three major Christian nations join their forces to practice God's love in the service of humankind with a sacrificial and serving spirit to actualize world peace. So, but that didn't happen. Instead, the globalist, and globalism is different from what Father's preaching here. Because globalism makes the world into a kind of a top-down communist system, basically, instead of giving sovereignty to individuals, which is the Christian idea, especially the Protestant Christian idea, to have that personal relationship with God. Now though is a time when the Christians around the world need to join forces to realize what Father says should have happened at the end of World War II, where Christians in America and in other countries as well come together, centering on the True Father's lineage to actualize world peace and to come together with a sacrificial and serving spirit for humankind. Without lapsing into nationalistic ideas centered on their countries, he says. So that is our rhema for this morning. Very eager to get into everything with Jack, so I want to go immediately to that now. Welcome, Jack.
Thank you very much.
And Jack, you're a professional hunter and sportsman, and I know you're a conservationist as well. You have a website. Can you tell us about your website? My
website is Jack's, Jacks, wildlifedreams.com. My email address would be jackharris jackswildlifedreams.com.
Okay, we're getting an echo in the sanctuary. Can the tech team deal with that, please? Okay, go ahead.
All right. Anyway, I'm the founder of Team Earth Conservation, which I hope to leave as my legacy to the future. I'm also very strong on the right to keep and bear arms. I believe that when the Founding Fathers wrote the Constitution of the United States, I believe they wrote the most important things first. They wrote, "We the people." The second most important thing to the Founding Fathers of this country was the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. At this time, every political leader elected in this country swears allegiance to the Constitution of the United States as written. Any politician that wants to take away the gun rights, votes against the gun rights, the Second Amendment of the United States, is in direct violation of that oath to support the Constitution of the United States as written. I'd like to make a note. The Constitution of the United States of Hyung is a very important book. I believe it's the most important book written since the Bible. Everyone should read this book. The goal of Hyung is to bring heaven on earth. We support the gun rights. When good people have guns, there are no problems. In every country in history where the gun rights were taken away from the civilian population, there was hell to pay for that population. The bad guys with the guns forced their way to the top. In America, that can't happen. We need far more young people into the shooting sports to learn. You mind if I pick that up?
No, but be careful where you point it. Okay.
No point. No gun ever killed a human being. Not one gun has ever killed a human being. Only bad people with guns kill humans. Soldiers, yes. They do mostly in defense of their own lives.
Jack, could you show that the people that this is actually unloaded? Show them how to clear that.
I hope I know. No.
Okay. Yeah.
Always, whenever you pick up a gun, Tim just noticed it to me, but this is one of the few times in my life I picked up a gun and did not check to see personally that gun is unloaded. That's the most important thing about knowing. Never take anyone's word that a gun is unloaded until you look for yourself. The very best reason for the AR, or semi-automatic rifle, is for home defense. If I was defending my home, my family, my property, this is the weapon I would want in my hand, with a high-capacity clip, because I want to be the last person shooting. I don't want to be shoot 4 or 5 times and change clips while people are attacking my home. A lot of these home invasions that happen here in America all the time, everywhere, are multiple people home invasions. That is the best reason to have the AR. This is the straightest shooting, hardest hitting weapon you can have in your hands. And the multiple clip is the best reason, the best reason for the high capacity clips, and civilians having this rifle is to defend their homes and their family. Whatever you have to do that is all right. I believe that's all right with God if you're defending yourself. They come to your house to attack your family and your friends. Whatever you do to defend yourself is all right.
Thank you. All right. Regarding gun rights, unfortunately, we have some unfortunate news out of Oklahoma this morning. And Oklahoma's Republican Governor Mary Fallin vetoed a bill late Friday that would have authorized adults to carry firearms without a permit or training, dealing a rare defeat to the National Rifle Association in conservative states. So this was basically going to introduce constitutional carry or something close to that in Oklahoma, but the governor vetoed it.
All right, the governor of Utah?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma.
The
Yes. Governor of Oklahoma.
Mary Fallin.
She is in violation of her constitutional oath to defend the Constitution of the United States as written. She should be impeached. There is a bill in Harrisburg to begin impeaching people who do not honor their oath to the Constitution of the United States. I wish I could remember the name of the senator that introduced that bill, but this is where the NRA and gun rights can win the gunfight. I'm in the gunfight to win it. I've carried guns all my life. I've been licensed to carry guns since 1980. I have no desire to hurt anyone that isn't trying to hurt me or the people very, very near me. Wayne LaPierre's good guy with a gun would have stopped every mass slaying in this country. The first shot would have identified the shooter. The second one would have been unavoidable, I believe. The third shot would have been Wayne LaPierre's good guy with a gun, no mass slaying. Takes four deaths to make a mass slaying. Every one of those would have been avoided if Wayne LaPierre's good guy with a gun had been there. I can't stress enough. I know thousands of good people that carry rifles and handguns, men and women. When the good people have the guns, there are no problems. It's in every country in history, the bad guys force their way to the top, and there's hell to pay for the civilian population. Names I point out, of course, is Hitler, Stalin, and Mao Zedong in Russia and China. One thing I want to say too is we need cooperation between the nuclear-armed nations. I don't want confrontation, but I want to sing this song, "America and Peace," and it's a message that I hope you'll listen to the words better than the voice, and I'm going to sing the song, and then I'm going to go back through it to tell what I feel, how the words affect me. I wrote this song in 2008. I published it in my book, Beyond My Wildest Dreams, at that time, and I'm going to sing this right now.
Okay, go ahead.
America and peace. God has blessed America, and I believe He always will, as long as we stand with justice on top of every hill. Our soldiers are the best of us. They stand at freedom's right. Honor is their cornerstone. The law's their guiding light. The insanity of war is nearly at its end. I believe the world will find a way for all men to be friends. God has blessed America, and I believe He always will, as long as we stand with justice on top of every hill. We ask for understanding, not a military fight. We ask all men to do what all men know is right. Our world is but a cinder orbiting in space. All men should understand this is our only place. God has blessed America, and I believe He always will, as long as we stand with justice on top of every hill. A mother's tears are all the same when the soldiers fall. If they will cry together, the world would heed their call. When all men understand this song, I'll know it shows the way to honor, justice, peace on earth, and all men's better day. God bless the world with peace, and America my home. God, please bless the world with peace, and America my home. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate. I want to go through that song word for word, line for line. Okay, I don't see how anyone could look at the United States and see that God has not blessed this country many times in many ways, especially with the founding fathers that were so far-sighted and wanted heaven on earth, as Sean Moon does now, and Reverend Sun Young Moon does for the world. I'm hoping that this is a message to the world. Our soldiers are the best of us. They stand at freedom's right. That's an absolutely true statement. I refer to America's soldiers as the hope of the world. They have been from the time this country was born, and we are still the most important Christian nation on this planet. That's without question. The insanity of war is nearly at its end. That is because I do not believe that President Trump, President Putin, or the leaders of China believe that nuclear weapons are an option in war. I believe that if more than 200 nuclear weapons exploded in this country and in this world, high-yield nuclear weapons exploded in this world, the Earth's atmosphere would be so polluted that just about everything died. So the intelligent species of this planet, supposedly intelligent species, destroys itself and everything else around it, all the other species of the world. Does that sound intelligent to anybody? We ask for understanding. That statement stands for itself. We don't want a military fight with anybody, especially nuclear weapons destroy the world. America, I must say this, America must maintain a military capable of throwing back anything. We discovered the ultimate weapon in war, and we've only used it twice to prove that we had the undefeatable weapon in war. Now, many countries have them, and but we've learned to control them, and that's why I believe that the insanity of war is nearly at its end.
Well, I certainly hope so. Right now, our wars appear to be almost on the point of breaking out in the Middle East and in East Asia as well. People say that peace is coming to East Asia and the Korean Peninsula, but I don't see it that way at all. I think the possibility of war there is just as much as when it was before all this talk of summits came about. But certainly hope that nuclear weapons will not be used again. But I don't know. You know, it's been since 1945. August 1945 was the last time that nuclear weapons were used in wartime, and so it's been more than 70 years since then, 73 years. I certainly hope that we can keep this streak going, but I don't know.
If it appears to me that the leader of North Korea has woke up a little bit, and he just wants to be considered an equal with the nuclear powers now. I'm hoping this is true. We're going to find out very shortly if he is serious about being a responsible leader to the leader for the world. I believe he is becoming responsible. I have referred to him in the past as an emotional 4-year-old with a nuclear weapon. I hope he proves me wrong about that.
Well, I think I have a different opinion about North Korea. I don't think that North Korea has suddenly changed. I don't think he's woken up. For one thing, North Korea is not just one man. It's a whole military establishment, and the military is basically behind Kim Jong-un. Of course, Kim Jong-un is in charge, and he can kill anybody he wants, and he's proven that by killing his uncle and his half-brother and many others. Especially his half-brother was killed in broad daylight in the middle of a passenger terminal of an international airport in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, with using a nerve agent that had never been used like that. So North Korea basically proved that it has this stockpile of nerve agents that it can use them to assassinate people or potentially to put them on a warhead and kill millions of people. North Korea is a very dangerous country, and it is a danger to its people. It's a danger to its neighbors, and I think the only way to get rid of nuclear weapons in North Korea will be to effect a regime change. As long as you have the current regime, there will be nuclear weapons in North Korea, and there will be chemical weapons, there will be biological weapons, and it will continue to be a menace to the security of Japan and the United States, and also of China and Russia, by the way.
Nuclear weapons and gas agents are a threat to everyone, everywhere. Tim is much more aware of the dangers of Korea than I am. And of course, it's impossible for two people to agree on everything at any one time. That's what makes America and the world, the human race, so great. That's another thing I'd like to mention. There's only one race on this world. You are a man, you are a woman. That is your race. You are a member of the human race. That's the only thing that should ever be important.
Well, let's get back to gun control, gun rights, actually, we should say. In Georgia, actually, we had a school board vote unanimously to arm their teachers. Georgia's Fannin County School Board voted unanimously Thursday night to arm teachers for defense of themselves and their students. The only caveat is that approved teachers must carry their guns in holsters. Well, that seems all right, right? You have to carry your gun in a holster? I do that.
Teachers, almost everyone at this church does that, I believe. Well, and that's fine. There again, I restate, when good people have guns, there are no problems. The bad guys, almost every bad guy that owns a gun has stolen it from somebody. You will never get the guns out of the hands of the bad people. I'd like to point out that almost every police officer, almost every military veteran supports the Second Amendment of the United States.
That's true. Let me go through this article a little bit more. This is a Breitbart article. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reports that district officials had been seriously considering the policy to arm teachers since April. Those who wish to carry must be approved by the Fannin County Sheriff and the Board of Education and must receive special training. 11 Alive, that's a TV station, I guess, reports that parents opposed to arming teachers immediately walked out of the board meeting following the vote. Last month, the Lawrence County School Board approved a program to allow some school officials to be armed. That's another county in Georgia. Supporters of armed teachers in both Lawrence and Fannin counties cited Parkland and other school shootings to argue for having teachers with guns on the spot to stop an attack. On February 22nd, 2018, President Trump pushed for states to arm teachers. He warned that first responders are 5 to 8 minutes away, but teachers can shoot sickos immediately. And before you came, I was just mentioning that I was at the NRA convention's seminar or panel discussion on their program called School Shield. And one of the panelists there was pointing out he had gone through the data and done a study there, and he cited a study that found that if you're going to do just one thing to protect students, just one thing, you don't have enough money to do a lot of things, just do one thing, have an armed officer in the school. He said that reduces the body count by 70%.
At least that. Armed guard. It's a shame to say, but it's true that armed guards are necessary in our schools today.
Mm-hmm. Well,
good people with guns.
Yeah, well, we protect our homes with guns. We protect our president with guns. We protect our celebrities with guns. They surround themselves with armed guards so that they can rail against the rights of the rest of us to have guns.
They do that all the time.
So they protect themselves with guns. So it makes sense that we would protect our children with guns, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And, but all these
and your family and your home.
But there's a law on the books that says that you cannot have a firearm within 1,000 feet of a school zone. That seems pretty counterproductive to me. It seems like an invitation to people who want to commit mass murder to just say, "Hey, come on in," because none of us have guns here. Guns here.
Try doing this. Try running 1,000 feet and see how many bullets a guy with an AR can fire in that 1,000-foot run in the same amount of time. That makes no sense to me at all. Gun-free zone, that's a safety zone for murderers. Mm-hmm. They target gun-free zones. They walk in there and they're saying, "I got lots of time to do lots of shooting because there's nobody here to shoot back."
That's right.
That's why these mass murders happen in gun-free zones. The guy that's going in there knows that there's nobody there to shoot back.
That's right.
And he is thinking, I got lots of time to do lots of shooting, and maybe I'll get away with it. I'll get out the back door and get away with it. There again, Wayne LaPierre's good guy with a gun ends that. Gun-free zone doesn't work.
No, that's right, it doesn't. Yesterday, again, there was a shooting at a school in California. Fortunately, only one person was wounded, and the suspect was taken into custody. We don't know much of the facts surrounding that case, why there was only one person wounded, whether he was stopped, but somehow we don't know that information yet. But we'll be looking forward to getting more reports on that, probably today. It happened yesterday, so I'm imagining that there'll be more reports on that coming out today. We don't have, I can't seem to find much information on it this morning. Let's take a break now, and we'll come back in a minute or so with more with Jack.
Folks, and look at what I've got here today. My God, take a look at this. This is a BFR in 454 Casull with an octagonal barrel, magna porting, micarta grips. And look at that. It even has my initials on it, JM. Look at that thing of beauty. My God. Pop open the cartridge insertion door, and look at that cylinder spin. The finest revolvers in the world. Woo! That's a cannon. That's a cannon. Oh, man. Pretty accurate, though. Target. Oh boy! Massive recoil.
Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, May 12th of 2018. Tim Elder and Jack Harris is sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung Moon, and I have some information on that school shooting in California yesterday. This is the LA Times article that was filed last night. It says this happened yesterday morning around 7 a.m. is when it began. The 911 calls poured in Friday morning during zero period at Highlands High School in Palmdale. Nearly 100 callers reported an incident on campus. There was a person with a gun, possibly holding hostages in a school library. Eventually, it was determined that a 14-year-old former student who had recently transferred out had brought a rifle to the campus and fired about 10 rounds, at least some from a bathroom, authorities said. One student was wounded. The 15-year-old is expected to fully recover, authorities said, and no one was held hostage in the library. But the shooting sparked widespread panic and drew a massive law enforcement response to the school, where students were advised to shelter in place as the campus went on lockdown. Several students texted and tweeted that they could hear gunfire, urging others to stay away. The closest trauma center cleared the operating room schedule in case staff needed to treat mass casualties. When you think about what we went through today and the fact that it worked out as well as it did, a lot of training goes into this, Los Angeles County Sheriff Jim McDonald told reporters Friday afternoon. The outcome was much better than anyone could have anticipated. The suspect, who was not identified, was detained at a nearby shopping center parking lot on suspicion of one count of attempted murder. McDonald said it is unclear if he and the injured student knew each other, but authorities are investigating the motive and have searched the suspect's home. The potential was for anybody to take a stray round there, whether they were aimed at or not, McDonald said. A very, very dangerous situation, but as far as trying to estimate what he was aiming for, too early to do that. Early Friday, the suspect's mother had called an LAPD officer, a family friend, telling him she was having trouble with her son, who had run away from the house. Shortly after the shooting, about 7:40 a.m., the suspect's father called the same LAPD officer. The boy had just called, the father said, and said he had shot his gun in the air and was heading towards Vaughn's, McDonald said. The off-duty officer found the boy in the supermarket parking lot. An SKS rifle was recovered from an open field west of the school shortly after 8:30 a.m., McDonald said. The student allegedly brought the gun to school in a bag, but McDonald would not say how or where the boy got it. Deputies cleared the school and deemed it safe by 9 a.m. and lifted the lockdown shortly before 10:30 a.m., officials said. All right, so that's the basic outline of what happened at the school in Palmdale in California yesterday. But this is, again, a situation where a child, apparently he was a former student who recently transferred, so he's no longer a student there, but he brought the rifle to school in a bag. But he knew that once he got into the school with that rifle, there was no one else to be there to challenge him.
So he could.
I don't know if he
exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah. So again, this is if he had thought that, well, maybe if I take my gun to school and shoot it, maybe there's going to be an armed officer there or an armed teacher there who's going to shoot back at me. Maybe if he had that kind of thought, he would not have done this in the first place.
It may have been a suicide attempt. It may,
or we don't know what he did. Whether it was a suicide attempt or whether he just shot. He claimed to his father that he was shooting it into the air, and somehow a 15-year-old caught a round, but he's fortunately not seriously injured. He's expected to fully recover. But my point is that if that school no-gun zone were not in place, this might not have happened at all.
Absolutely
Why did he
correct.
choose?
Absolutely correct. He would not have done that. He would not have taken the gun to school if he had realized somebody would shoot back.
He didn't take it to the shopping center. When he went to the shopping center, he threw the gun away, apparently into the open field on his way to the shopping center, to the mall.
Yeah.
All right. So he knew that in the mall, he might be in danger. Mm-hmm. Someone might shoot back.
Yeah, that's right.
But in school, he says, I'm safe in school. No one's going to shoot back. so I can take that there and I can shoot it off a few times and shoot it off for a few rounds and make a name for myself.
He put his name in the history books. A lot of people don't care what they're remembered for. They only want their name in the history book.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I'd like to ask. I want to get back to the third stanza of my song for a minute.
All right, let's do that.
A mother's tears are all the same when their soldiers fall. There is a sleeping giant in world peace, and that is the mothers and fathers who have lost their children to war. If they would unite their voice, we could have peace in this world very, very quickly. If they would stand up and say, no more, no more. Parents like us, I believe we could have peace in this country in this world very, very quickly.
All right, thank you. I want to go to an article now about a Australian. People on the left always citing Australia as an example of how you take away guns from people and to prevent mass shootings. But guess what? They had a mass shooting there in Australia. And this is in the New York Times. The Western Australia police on Saturday identified 7 people, including 4 children, who were found dead from gunshot wounds the day before in what was the country's worst mass shooting in more than 20 years. The police were called just after mass shooting. So they took away the guns, but they still have shootings. How does that happen? Yeah? I guess the bad people didn't give up their guns, huh?
No bad guy will ever give up a gun. He will never walk into a police station and say, here's my gun.
Right.
That will never happen. There are far too many guns in this world in the hands of bad people to get them out. The answer is arm your good people. Everywhere in America, where the gun laws are the strictest, let's keep the guns out of the cities and out of the... That's where the crime rates are the highest.
Yes.
Crime-free, gun-free zone.
St. Louis, Baltimore.
Everywhere in this country, everywhere in the world probably, there would be far less shootings if the good people were armed and could defend themselves. When you see NRA, when you see Gun Owners of America, you should see armed and will protect myself and the people around me. Armed and friendly.
Yes. At the NRA, that was certainly true. People were armed and friendly.
That's right.
Yes.
That almost every NRA member has no desire to shoot anyone or hurt anyone. I'm very much encouraged. I spend a lot of time at the rifle ranges around here in eastern Pennsylvania, and every day I am seeing more and more young people being taught to handle guns carefully, being very well taught, and many of them, I talked to many of them, and they are saying they are waking up to the fact that you can be ambushed in church, you can be slaughtered in church, you can be slaughtered in a McDonald's restaurant. If you don't have a gun to defend yourself, there again, these people were targeting places where people don't have guns to shoot back.
During the media frenzy after the February 28th event, we were receiving all sorts of phone calls from all over the place, and some of them were supportive, but many of them were not. And I got one of the ones that were not that was not supportive, and the man was asking me, do you own an AR-15? And I said, yes, I do. Maybe I shouldn't have told him that, but anyway, I told him I did. Well, I guess that's pretty obvious since
they won't come to your house. They won't come to your house.
It was pretty obvious since I was carrying it on camera during the event. But anyway, and he said, "Why do you have to have an AR-15?" I said, "Well, to defend my home and my family and people I love." And he says, "Well, who's gonna come after you? Who are you going to defend yourself against?" And I said, "Well, another person with an AR-15, a bad guy with an AR-15." And then he said, no one with an AR-15 is ever going to attack you. That's what he told me. How can he know that? These things always happen in the places where they're least expected. In Parkland, Florida, after that, they say, well, we never expected this to happen in our community. This is the least likely place where this kind of thing would happen. That's where it happens.
The law in Florida, the police officers in Florida, it was their fault. This young man threw up red flag after red flag after red flag. I believe that he knew somebody in the police department that was saying, "Oh, he's okay. He won't hurt anybody." They were tamping down the risk of this young man. That's why I say background checks are so essential. And when they find flags like that, they can't ignore them, for Christ's sake. And the police standing outside, hearing the gunfire in the school, the kids are being slaughtered, and the police don't enter the building to stop it.
Well, many times the bad guys pass the
ridiculous?
background checks, don't they? The bad guys pass the background checks in many of these cases.
In some cases.
And many of the people who don't pass are able to appeal and get their guns anyway.
The background checks will not solve every problem. You will never solve all the gun problems in any one way, but they are essential. They will certainly weed out the higher risk people. As I say, you can't solve all the problems with guns, but you can certainly minimize them. In Chicago, the bad guys with the guns. This is President Obama's city, and the police in Chicago defend this country as much as our soldiers do. They're in a war zone. Because the vast majority of good people in Chicago can't shoot back. We need people to wake up to the fact that good people with guns are not dangerous, and the bad guys, when the good people have guns, the bad guys stay in their holes. The rats stay in their holes.
Yep. NRA is reporting that the crime rate in Dallas went down during the convention there, during the NRA convention there. Yeah.
Good people.
I guess they took a vacation. They went someplace else.
Yeah, they took a vacation. Yeah. That's what happens with bad guys with guns. They stay in their holes. They won't go where people can shoot back.
All right, let's take a break now. Let's take our 7 o'clock break, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes with more news from a Chonico perspective. Welcome back to the King's Report for Saturday, May 12th, 2018. I'm Tim Elder and Jack Harris, professional sportsman and conservationist, sitting in for the second king of Cheongguk, Hyung. And this hour, I want to go to some stories about the environment because Jack is a conservationist and an environmentalist. And we see on the Drudge Report that they're linking to a story in the Independent out of UK about a plan in the Philippines to build a pollution-free city that will be larger than Manhattan. So I want to go through this article and then to get Jack's comments on that. Manila, the hyper-dense capital of the Philippines, is known for its traffic jams. In a 2016 survey, navigation company Waze ranked Manila as having the worst traffic on Earth, which would be, I guess, in the universe as well, since we don't have traffic anyplace else. So worst traffic in the universe, you could say. The city's reliance on cars also exacerbates its growing air pollution problem. As a possible solution to Manila's smog and gridlock, the country plans to build an entirely new, more sustainable city called New Clark. Plans for the $14 billion development, which will be larger than Manhattan, calls for drones, driverless cars, technologies that will reduce buildings' water and energy usage, a giant sports complex, and plenty of green space. Take a look below. Over the next 3 decades, the Philippines aims to build out New Clark about 75 miles outside Manila. According to the development's plans, the city will eventually stretch 36 square miles, a land area larger than Manhattan, and house up to 2 million people. New Clark will be divided into 5 districts, each with a specific function: government, business, education, agricultural, and recreation. While New Clark's exact design is not fleshed out, developers say the urban plan will prioritize environmental sustainability and climate resilience. With a minimum elevation of 84 feet above the sea level, the city will likely not see much flooding. Okay, well, we can go into that. I mean, here we're... what is it? They're 184 feet above sea level. Here we're more than 1,000 feet above sea level, but we see flooding here. So to reduce carbon emissions, 2/3 of New Clark will be reserved for farmland, parks, and other green space. The buildings will incorporate technologies that reduce energy and water usage. Driverless cars running on electric energy rather than CO2-emitting gas will roam the streets. Additionally, the city will feature a giant sports stadium and an agro-industrial park. New Clark's developers BCDA Group and Suburbana Jurong plan to start construction in 2022. The new city will serve as a twin city to Manila, alleviating congestion in the capital. Surbana Jurong CEO Heng Fine Wong told CNBC. People shop ahead of New Year celebrations at a street. Oh, that's a caption, I'm sorry. You'll gradually see Manila becoming a different type of city. And in New Clark City, you'll see new technology companies coming through, he said. The vision for New Clark certainly sounds utopian, but the ambitious plan faces several challenges, including persuading Manila residents to move there. A new railway line will cut the travel time between the two cities in half. The Philippines also struggles with economic development, and building an eco city from scratch will come with a hefty price tag. According to Wong, public-private partnerships will finance the project. In recent years, countries around the world, especially China, have unveiled plans for pie-in-the-sky urban developments. A number of realized projects have failed to attract a significant population and turned into ghost cities. Construction sites and vacant streets in Jiangluo Bay, a new biggest central business district under construction in Tianjin, is there. And Yujaipu and Jiangluo Bay, a metropolitan area that was supposed to be known as China's Manhattan, is half-built and largely empty. Building cities from scratch rarely solves existing problems, but designing them can help urban planners imagine what's possible. So you know what? I've seen this, like the article says at the end, there have been these attempts by governments to alleviate population and build new capitals, so forth. Japan has considered it and decided not to do it. They decided not to create a new capital somewhere else other than Tokyo. Korea tried it twice. They built one sort of new city where they moved some government ministries and so forth, and but guess what? The population didn't follow, so they built another one further south, farther away from Seoul, and put more other government ministries there, hoping that that would then attract people to this new city, and also some universities. And they've encouraged universities to move out of the city and so forth like that. But Seoul still keeps getting larger and larger. So I'm pretty sure that this is not going to work based on past experience. But anyway, people like to imagine, engineers like to imagine what's possible.
Well, I applaud them for trying. I would send the government of the Philippines a Team Earth Conservation Award if I had the address to send it to them, and I would support their efforts to create this city. It's what the world needs. The human population is going to continue to expand exponentially, and we have to take care of the planet, especially the air and the water of this planet.
But Jack, I see this is a government-imposed utopia, and I think that is the fundamental mistake that these people are making, and also other governments are making. That we can hire a development company. First of all, I can see, a development company comes along and says, "Where can we make money? Where can we?"
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. We can design
the planet.
We can design a new city. We did it for South Korea. We tried it for Japan. We can do it for Manila. Maybe they'll pay us. So I can imagine that the development company probably came to Philippines with this idea. But more essential than that is that this is a government-imposed utopia. It's a top-down. And top-down utopias have always failed, and they will always fail because they are top-down. God's kingdom is going to be built from the bottom up. All right?
Absolutely.
And yes, we will take care of the earth, we will take care of the air, but not this way, not through a top-down government-imposed utopia. Oh yeah, we've got all these technologies, driverless cars. Driverless cars themselves are very dangerous because you're putting your life into the hands of whoever is programming the software, or whoever has whoever's able to hack into that, or if the government wants to kill somebody, they can simply create a traffic accident through their control of the software. But these utopian people want to have driverless cars. That's the thing of the future. But it has to be bottom up. And the way to create an ideal society, the way to disperse the population, which I think is a good way, is a good thing, because government's always trying to bring people together into a city so that they can control. Yes.
Everything.
But people need to take the initiative to move out of cities, to move into the nature. And we could do that now more and more because of the internet. And to keep the internet out of the control of the centralized authorities, but to keep it free as it is. The internet allows people to do business in rural communities, to get their message out. The way that the second king has used the internet over the last 4 years is an example of that. Here in Newfoundland, Pennsylvania, northeast Pennsylvania, this rural area, we have covered the world. With the king's message through YouTube, through Facebook. I know Google and Facebook are doing a lot of bad things, but at least they were tools that could be used for that, and also for education. More and more people are able to receive education through the internet. So that allows people to disperse from the cities People have to take that initiative to do that. And that is the way that and to have your land and to become sustainable on your own land and to protect the environment on your own land and in the community. So environmental protection, I think, has to happen on the local level.
At the beginning, at the grassroots level.
At the grassroots level, yes. That is how we create God's kingdom. That is how we create a true utopia, not this kind of government imposed utopia. This will fail. I predict. You've heard it first here.
Well,
go ahead. I'm finished my rant.
Okay. I'd like to go to that conservation award.
Okay.
I'd like to talk about the Team Earth Conservation Award for a little while. On this award, you will see certain animals depicted, pictures. You will see the eagle oversees the world. The soaring eagle oversees the world. The tiger, I believe, is the most beautiful animal in the world. I've always believed that. And it is the most endangered of our large carnivorous animals. The bear is on there because it represents the strength of a Team Earth effort for conservation and the blue whale, the largest creature ever known to inhabit the earth, is there because it represents the need for clean water. The eagle represents clean air. The bear represents the strength of a Team Earth effort, and and it shows the world's environment. I'm trying to make the Team Earth conservation my legacy to the future. And I'm doing that in a lot of different ways, and Tim is helping me right here today, I'm sure, in establishing that. I'm trying to think of as far as the water is the warming of the earth is a proven fact. The earth is getting warmer. The warmer the air becomes, the more water vapor it can absorb in storms. You will see in the not-too-distant future, I believe you will see in the not-too-distant future, storms that are far past Hurricane Sandy and Lee and Irene storms here in the eastern Pennsylvania. Did anybody believe that a single storm could produce 50 inches of rain in Texas? The earth is changing, and we are warming the atmosphere, and that is not going to change. It's accelerating. Your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren are going to see storms that are far more severe because of the warming atmosphere.
But we had the coldest April in a long time.
Is that? Yeah, we did have
overall
a cold
in the United States. It was the coldest April in 20 years, and in some places the coldest April ever in history. And I don't know about the global warming, whether that's a proven fact. I think that's still open to discussion.
Well, it's my opinion that it's happening, and it will continue to happen. I've been wrong before. Believe it or not, I have been wrong before, and I know that. But these are my opinions, and only time will tell. But the Agnes flood of
Al Gore said that many things would happen, and they have not happened.
That's true.
There's still snow in the Himalayas. We still have the ice cap in the North Pole. That has not disappeared. Many things that Al Gore predicted
have not
happened.
It has reduced the ice cap in the north. It has not eliminated it.
Even whether it has not been, whether it's been reduced or not, I think is open to question, because receives some measures where it's actually increasing.
Well, about 4 or 5 years ago, Canada produced an estimate of 20 billion tons of ice have melted into the sea in the last 10 years. And that is just the single, the glaciers are receding, which indicate, but there is one scientist predicted that global warming would actually right itself because this warmer atmosphere will bring more snow into the mountains and regenerate the glaciers. The glaciers building up the glaciers. I believe in science very, very strongly.
Well, science means that we're always open to testing our theories. Testing,
Right.
Always looking, going back. And so there's really no such thing as settled science. No such thing as settled science, because we're always going back and being always skeptical and always testing. And I think it's important for the people who talk about global warming to remember that. And there's been some accusations, that this whole global warming thing is based on the manipulation of past temperature data. In other words, past temperature data was manipulated so that it would be lower than it actually was, so that the present temperatures appear to be comparatively higher than in the past. So that has to be looked into. So there are many questions that need to be answered about global warming.
With people and money, greed can influence anything. People are obsessed with money, with making money. They can, in fact, manipulate facts to show what they want to believe. That's true. That's true.
Okay. Before we run out of time, I want to go into some things about North Korea, if that's okay with you.
Yeah. Fine.
Here in the Wall Street Journal this morning, we have an article, U.S. holds out promise of economic prosperity for North Korea. Now, Mike Pompeo is saying that all that North Korea has to do is to give up its nuclear weapons and they'll have prosperity. We want to talk about this. The Trump administration offered North Korea leader Kim Jong-un a significant incentive on Friday, vowing to help the isolated nation achieve economic prosperity if Mr. Kim agrees to eliminate his nuclear arsenals at next month's summit meeting with President Donald Trump. But there's a fundamental misunderstanding here that people think, the North Koreans are just like us. And the North Koreans are just like us. Kim Jong-un is not just like us.
Not at all.
He's got prosperity. He's got his Mercedes. That's right. He's got his Mercedes. He's got his women. He as you can tell, he has everything he wants to eat. He's got his prosperity. But he wants what Kim Jong-un wants is not prosperity for his country, because prosperity for his country will bring down his regime and he will lose his job. All right, because when people become prosperous, they want the best way to bring down a dictatorship is to foster its middle class, I believe, because always when the middle class becomes more stronger, it starts wanting to have a say in managing the country and running the country.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So if you want to be a dictator, you got to keep your people poor. And that's the whole idea. Right?
Well, so that's what he's been doing all his life.
Mike Pompeo offering North Korea prosperity, they're going to say, wait a second, we keep our people poor for a reason. It's the only way that we can control them. So what's all this stuff about offering us prosperity? No, thank you. This is probably what the North Korea is saying. But Mike Pompeo, being a good American, doesn't understand that. He thinks that Kim Jong-un thinks like he does. But Kim Jong-un and the people around him don't. They need poverty, because poverty is the way to keep people under control.
The governmental rule. Right?
Yeah, in North Korea, if Mike Pompeo is saying here, if North Korea takes bold action to quickly denuclearize, the United States is prepared to work with North Korea to achieve proper prosperity on the par with our South Korean friends. They don't want South Korean prosperity in their country. All right, the offer represented an effort to narrow what many experts see as a substantial gap between the positions of the two countries headed into the historic summit in Singapore on June 12th. The Trump administration wants to move quickly to eliminate North Korea's nuclear arsenal, a process one former Trump administration official suggested might be done within a year. But Mr. Kim earlier this week stressed his interest is in phased and synchronous measures. Synchronous measures. What does that mean? That means that I get rid of one, you get rid of one. Okay? Remember, I've been saying this. Kim Jong-un, he's not talking about denuclearization of North Korea. He's talking about denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And there's a big difference. Not that there are any nuclear weapons in South Korea. U.S. used to have them there, but they were all withdrawn in the 1980s. But North Korea understands that. It's not accusing South Korea of having nuclear weapons. It is saying, though, that the South Korea is under the nuclear umbrella of the United States. So they're saying if we get rid of our nuclear weapons, then South Korea should not be under the nuclear umbrella of the United States any longer. Right? So that's what that is what, when Kim Jong-un says phased and synchronous measures, he's saying we get rid of our nuclear weapons, U.S. has to get rid of its nuclear weapons. All right? So this is not going to work out. The terminology analysts say suggests a potentially lengthy process in which Pyongyang might receive some economic and diplomatic benefit during the initial phase while putting off the complete elimination of its nuclear arsenal to a final stage of a pact. They're not going to get rid of even one. Don't worry. I can tell you right now. I can write the script right now, all right? Until there's regime change in North Korea, not a single nuclear weapon is going to be destroyed in that country.
I would agree. I would tend to agree with that. I'd like to believe that he'd agree to, he'd honor his agreements to do that, to eliminate them, but I don't believe he will.
Yep, yeah, he will not. We would all like to believe it. That's what we would like to believe, yeah. But what we like to believe is not the same as what will actually happen. And the reason they will not, the reason for this is that Kim Jong-un and his cohorts believe that the nuclear weapons are the best way to preserve the regime. And he's right.
Oh.
And wrong. He's both right and wrong. The nuclear weapons will actually undermine and destroy the regime. But for the short term, he is correct. That he basically has he's basically holding South Korea hostage right now. The military personnel and the U.S. citizens especially are being held as hostage by Kim Jong-un right now in South Korea. But eventually, though, his regime will be destroyed because of the fact that he has nuclear weapons. But that's in the longer term. Mr. Pompeo, in his first news conference since he returned earlier this week from North Korea and secured the release of 3 American detainees, and that, by the way, is the good thing that has already happened out of this whole thing. 3 people were released from North Korean labor camps or wherever they were being held, and that is a good thing that Trump has successfully done, and he deserves credit for that. Anyway, Pompeo acknowledged that he had discussed an array of complex problems with Mr. Kim. He said the North Korean leader has yet to make the strategic decision about how to proceed on denuclearization. Mr. Trump has set a high bar for the Singapore meeting, saying it could be a special moment for world peace. Both leaders have professed their commitment to nuclear-free Korean Peninsula, but experts say the two sides don't necessarily agree on the sequence of steps and how much time will be allotted to carry them out. But both sides also, and this is what is not getting through to the English language media, both sides also disagree on what it means to have a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula. All right? America believes that nuclear-free Korean Peninsula can be achieved simply by getting rid of all the nuclear weapons on the Korean Peninsula. And since those are in North Korea, just get rid of the ones in North Korea, and then you'll have a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula. That's the American beliefs is. That's not what North Korea believes. That's not what North Korea believes. They say to have a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula, you have to get rid of the nuclear umbrella, the U.S. nuclear umbrella, from the Korean Peninsula. U.S. must not protect South Korea or threaten North Korea with its nuclear weapons. Mm-hmm. So the U.S. forces on Okinawa, on Guam, are threatening North Korea. U.S. Nuclear arsenal on the U.S. mainland is threatening North Korea. So to have a nuclear-free Korean Peninsula, you have to get rid of those threats to North Korea from Okinawa, from Guam, from the U.S. mainland. So it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. All right. The goal must be clarity on what denuclearization means. Robert Gallucci, who negotiated with North Korea during the Clinton administration, said of the summit meeting. So maybe Gallucci understands this. Under the best of circumstances, experts said, the two leaders might agree at their summit on a set of detailed principles that would settle questions of timing, outline critical steps each side would take, and guide the highly technical follow-on talks by lower-ranking officials. Former negotiators have already begun to debate how the U.S. should respond if the two sides are unable to reach a comprehensive agreement in Singapore. Well, in that case, there will only be one option left, or there will be two options left. One option will be to the United States to back off and say, okay, we'll live with this security threat from North Korea. We won't do anything more. We'll just pretend it isn't there. And we'll build up our defensive, or somehow create more defensive anti-missile technology. Capabilities, yeah. The other option then is to do a military strike against North Korea, to get rid of North Korea's nuclear weapons in that way. The summit's objective, that's why I say that the possibility of war on the Korean Peninsula has not been reduced at all, because I believe that the summit in Singapore will not produce a denuclearized Korean Peninsula, and in order to achieve that, the Trump administration will have to carry out a military strike against North Korea and probably a regime change in Pyongyang. Working with China, well, how, I don't know. But China right now is in a difficult position because they're no longer in the driver's seat on the Korean Peninsula. They're no longer. They used to be in a pretty good position. Everybody was worried about North Korea, and everybody was going to China and said, please do something about North Korea. Everyone was saying that to China.
But he couldn't do it.
Trump said to Xi Jinping last year in April at Mar-a-Lago very clearly, we want you to solve the North Korea problem, but if you cannot or will not, we will. Now we're in the we will stage. And guess what? China's been pushed away. And China doesn't like that, which is why they've called Kim Jong-un to China twice now in the past 2 months. For 7 years, Kim Jong-un couldn't get an invitation to Beijing. Mm-hmm. And Xi Jinping didn't visit North Korea. He visited South Korea, but he didn't visit North Korea, the president of China. But all of a sudden, China is very interested and has called Kim Jong-un to China now twice just in the last 60 days.
Well, I would like to think they're actually trying to improve relations.
Well, China is trying to maintain its interests in North Korea because they've been pushed out now and they're trying to get back into the driver's seat. The summit's objective, Mr. Gallucci said, should be a North Korean commitment to give up their nuclear weapons, fissile material, and nuclear programs in a reasonable amount of time, which he defined as anywhere from a matter of months to a few years. Well, this is Gallucci who negotiated the failed agreements of the past. If we get that, along with a commitment to allow the access necessary to monitor and verify to the extent possible implementation of such denuclearization, the summit will be a success, he said. And if they fail to get that, it will be a failure. Other former negotiators said such an approach may be setting the bar too high. Robert Einhorn, a former senior State Department official who once negotiated with North Korea on its ballistic missiles, said the Trump administration should test whether Mr. Kim is prepared to quickly eliminate his nuclear arsenal, but be prepared to keep negotiating, even if it turns out Pyongyang won't go that far. Now, they should go in big. They should go in big for big. Find out if North Korea is prepared to make this commitment in a credible way and offer very substantial rewards, Mr. Einhorn said. But if it's not achievable, they need to think hard about what options are left. And one option is to go for a more phased approach. For some experts, a modest outcome would preclude North Korea from testing and perfecting its long-range missiles while keeping the door open for negotiating grander steps in the future. But this kind of thing has been tried before. And this is exactly the kind of thing that President Trump wants to avoid. This kind of, a phased approach, they make promises to do this and that. But that has never worked out in the past.
What was Reagan's, when he was talking about Russia, he talked about something about verify.
Yes,
and
trust but verify.
Trust but verify,
yes.
Yeah.
But verification is always the problem. And it was a problem with the Soviet Union as well. And eventually the way the Soviet Union was brought down was that Reagan brought about the strategic, Strategic Arms Defense Initiative, SDI, which the media referred to as Star Wars, Strategic Defense Initiative. And Soviet Union did not have the economic power to keep up with that.
Right.
And that eventually brought them down. It was always the verification is impossible. It was impossible in Iraq, right. And it's been impossible in Iran, as the recent Israeli intelligence report shows. It's always impossible because they're able to hide things that they're not supposed to be hiding. For some experts, a modest outcome would preclude North Korea from testing and perfecting its long-range missiles while keeping the door open for negotiating grander steps in the future. But Trump administration officials have cautioned against settling for North Korean commitments that could be reversible. Mr. Trump, officials say, has talked privately of resolving the North Korean issue on his watch. Publicly, he has suggested he is prepared to walk out of the summit and return to a campaign of maximum pressure if he thinks Mr. Kim isn't serious. Maximum pressure. Maximum pressure. Maximum pressure is another word, I think, for a military strike at some point. One incentive that the U.S. hasn't offered publicly is a reduction in the 28,500 American troops in South Korea. South Korean Foreign Minister Kang Kyung-hwa, who appeared with Mr. Pompeo on Friday, said the U.S. military presence in the South is first and foremost a matter for Seoul and Washington. But, there's been talk of having a peace agreement by the end of the year. In the summit between North and South Korea, there was an agreement that they would work for that goal, to have a peace agreement between the two sides by the end of the year. And if you have a peace agreement, all right, then after the peace agreement is in place, what then is the justification for U.S. troops in South Korea? None. On the South Koreans say, no. The U.S. troops are not here for us. They're here to actually for China. They're here to counter China, which may be true strategically, but that's not what has been said. All these years, all right, for 50, 60, 70 years, the United States has been saying we keep troops in South Korea to defend South Korea against the North Korean threat.
Right.
Against the North Korean threat. But with a peace agreement, that threat theoretically is no longer there. Theoretically, at least, they have a peace agreement, right?
The peace agreement on their side will probably be just words. It won't.
But anyway, you have a peace agreement. I agree with you. But you have a peace agreement. So what is the reason then to keep U.S. troops in South Korea if you have a peace agreement? So I think the withdrawal of U.S. troops from South Korea will be a natural consequence.
Major mistake.
Will be a natural consequence of entering into a peace agreement. And now, especially now that Kim Jong-un is so popular in South Korea, you have little cutouts of Kim Jong-un, people taking pictures of themselves with Kim Jong-un, cutout and that kind of thing. And basically, North Korea has won the competition on who controls the Korean Peninsula.
The Korean Peninsula, yeah.
So that is why Kim Jong-un is coming into this negotiation as a victor. He's coming into this negotiation saying, okay, now I'm in charge. We just have to negotiate the withdrawal of U.S. troops. So why? So that is his incentive here. And China, I think, wants that to happen. China wants their strategic objective is to get U.S. troops out of the South Korea.
Korean Peninsula. Yeah.
And they see that as an achievable goal through this summit and through the negotiations. So I think we'll be very surprised maybe about what comes out and what happens during that summit on June 12th in Singapore.
I was a little bit encouraged. President Trump met with the leaders of China, and he after that meeting, Donald Trump said, "Yes, we disagree on many subjects, but the leader of China is a good man." That encouraged me a little bit to show that he has gained some respect, and hopefully it's been transferred both ways to what America wants and China wants. If he is truly a good man, we can work out our differences without war.
The leader of China is not a good man. The leader of China, Xi Jinping, is a...
I don't know him. I don't know enough about the subject.
Xi Jinping is a second-generation Marxist. His father was a official in a previous communist regime in China, head of the propaganda department. He was purged during the father was purged during the Cultural Revolution, and the whole family was sent out to a rural area in China. And Xi Jinping grew up feeding pigs and so forth, working on a farm. But he is a very committed Marxist, and you can see in his remarks, for example, he says that America should take away the citizens' guns and protect their rights, give them stability.
That's weakening America. That's an attempt to weaken America.
That's right. And so his idea is stability, bring stability. Bringing stability is the function of government.
Stability means control of everything else. Absolute control.
Absolute control. Yes, absolute control. And that is why in China they're instituting something called a social credit system, where you are given a credit score. Like we have a FICO score here in the United States, a credit score here in the United States.
Yeah.
People in China are being given credit scores, and this credit score will determine whether they can go to university, whether they can fly on airplanes, whether they can get certain jobs, government jobs, for example, or other jobs, whether they can start businesses, get bank loans. All this kind of thing will be influenced by this social credit score, which will be determined, of course, by how loyal they are to the Communist Party.
And which would
and if they are post critical comments online, for example, that gives them a negative on their credit score and that kind of thing, if they speak out against the Communist Party at all. And right now they are harvesting organs from underground Christians and from Falun Gong practitioners. They're arresting these people for their religious beliefs. They're destroying churches, bulldozing churches, and they are doing all sorts of bad things. So Xi Jinping is not a good man. He's being portrayed in the communist propaganda media as the savior of socialism, but he's not a good man. Yeah.
Well, you know more about this than I do.
But anyway, let's go to this. South Korea has also offered to help North Korea develop its economy. During his recent meeting with Mr. Kim, South Korean President Moon Jae-in offered him a memory stick of video clips and data showing how North might become prosperous if a denuclearization deal was reached. Some conservative experts agree it is important that North Korea consent to a quick dismantlement schedule so the regime there can't attempt to wait out the Trump presidency. For the summit to be useful, they say the U.S. needs to force the issue of timing. That is, what is the value of sweeping a fundamental disagreement under the table, said Anthony Ruggiero, a former Treasury Department official, now a fellow at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracy's think tank. The value of confronting it now is that if they are not serious, you can return to the maximum pressure campaign before that threat erodes. Joel Witt, a former State Department official, said the North Korean concept of phasing is consistent with ideas the country's officials have long broached about how to build confidence after more than 60 years of confrontation. This is serious on their part, Mr. Witt. It's not let's get a photo op and we'll go home and declare victory. I think the minimum definition of success would be a general agreement on principles that would govern the future of U.S.-North Korea relations as well as objectives for follow-on negotiations. Back in the 1990s, there was even talk of opening up U.S. embassy in Pyongyang, and also a North Korean embassy in Washington, and North Korean officials were actually going around looking for land or properties in the Washington area where they could build their embassy, and also staff were being recruited for the U.S. embassy in North Korea at that time in the early 1990s. But that didn't come out. That didn't work out. So we'll see what happens here. But I'm very, very skeptical, and these people that the Wall Street Journal is quoting are all people who have participated in past failed negotiations. Nothing has worked in the past, and what President Trump is trying to do now is to do something different from the past, and so I hope that he does not listen to these people. If denuclearization is the goal, the only way that that's going to happen is through regime change. North Korea will not give up its nuclear weapons because it believes that those weapons are there to protect the regime, and that there's the only way that this regime can be protected. This is what the North Korea will demand. They say, if we give up our nuclear weapons, how are you going to guarantee that our regime will be maintained? Iraq gave up its weapons, and look what happened to it. Libya gave up its weapons, and look what happened to it. In each case, they were attacked by the United States. What is to say that if we give up our weapons, we're not going to be attacked by the United States? This is what they will say. This is the script that they are preparing. All right? So be prepared to answer that. But they will say, look, the nuclear weapons are the only way that we can guarantee the integrity of our regime. Now, they have a house of cards, and they know it. They know that if there any change will bring down the whole thing. Prosperity? Are you kidding? That's the least of what they want. They don't want prosperity for their people, because then they will lose control of their people. Mike Pompeo, I don't know. Mike Pompeo is really wrong on that.
I would like to make this statement about President Trump. I believe that President Trump has tried to do everything that he said he would do during his election campaign.
Mm-hmm. He sure has, yeah.
He has been hamstrung by both the Republican and Democratic parties.
True.
For the simple reason that he was elected because he was not a lifelong Democrat or Republican.
Not part of the establishment.
Part of the establishment. He was elected because people want change in this country. He is trying everything he can do to make America great again, and I believe he's succeeding, actually.
He is, yes.
And so I support Donald Trump presidency more now than I did when I was before the election. I was fortunate enough to be on a national stage with a national radio show, Francine Natal's radio show out of Philadelphia. And I was fortunate enough to be able to say this election was a clear choice between the long-term suppression of freedom with Hillary Clinton and the freedom of Donald Trump. And I believe that God did not allow the freedom of the United States to fall. That is why Donald Trump is president of the United States.
Yes. And let's, for another view, let's get what Maxine Waters said on the House floor yesterday. This is rather entertaining. California Congressman Maxine Waters doesn't want to hear any talk about making America great, especially if it's coming from a straight white man. Waters went off the rails at a recent House debate when Pennsylvania Republican Representative Mike Kelly had the audacity to suggest the country needed to shift focus from what divides to what unites. And here's what she said. Let's see, is this what? No, this is what Kelly said. We are trying to make sure we are making America great every day, in every way, and the best way to do that is to stop talking about discrimination and start talking about the nation, Kelly said Tuesday, directing his comments to Waters. We're coming together as a people, in spite of what you say. Committee Chairman Tom McClintock reminded lawmakers to direct comments to him rather than to each other before yielding to the gentle lady from California. Waters ignored his request and immediately attacked Kelly, pointing to her special double victim status as a black woman. Mr. Kelly, Please do not leave, because I want you to know that I am more offended as an African-American woman than you will ever be. And this business about making America great again, it's your president that's dividing this country, she said. And don't talk to me about the fact that we don't understand. That's the attitude that's been given toward women time and time again. Kelly attempted to chime in, but Waters refused to yield for a response. McClintock reminded Waters to direct her remarks to him, and she ignored the request a second time. I respect the chair, but don't stop me in the middle of when you don't stop him in the middle. So I shall continue, Waters said, turning back to Kelly. Don't you dare talk to me like that and think that somehow women don't understand what goes on the floor of automobile dealers. McClintock again requested that Waters respect the rules, which sent the 79-year-old politician to a tirade about Trump. I don't appreciate that you did not interrupt him when he was making those outrageous remarks about him knowing more about discrimination than I know about discrimination, Waters shouted. I resent the remark about making America great again. He's down here making a speech for this dishonorable president of the United States, etc., etc., etc. I'm getting a cough now. Anyway.
Is this an elected official?
That's Maxine Waters.
This lady is an elected official.
Yes.
Well, she's in direct violation of her sworn oath to support the Constitution of the United States.
There are people in California who continue to vote for her. Huh? There are people in California who continue to vote for this woman.
Well,
she's up for re-election this November.
I just pointed out, as I said, she has absolutely violated her oath to protect the Constitution of the United States as written, and should be out of office.
But what would we do without her? You got to have some.
Well, we wouldn't have anything to talk about. I know that.
Some of these people we've got to keep around for entertainment. She's certainly one of them. Yeah. Yeah.
I'd rather her be around somewhere else, out of the limelight.
Well, we have a few minutes left, so let's talk a little bit about John McCain. I really am saddened by I'm saddened by anyone who is having to leave this world before they're able to meet the Messiah. And John McCain appears to be in that kind of a situation now. He's about to die, it looks like, from cancer. But he's trying to do all the damage that he can before he leaves.
Yes.
John McCain is not signing off quietly, says the AP. And in so much, as in so much of the senator's extraordinary life, the rebellious Republican is facing this challenging chapter, battling brain cancer in his own rule-breaking way, stirring up old fights and starting new ones. Rarely has the sickbed been so lively. McCain is promoting a new book, delivering a counterpunch of ideals contrary to President Donald Trump's running of the White House. McCain's long-distance rejection of CIA Director nominee Gina Haspel's history with torture goaded former Vice President Dick Cheney into a fresh debate over waterboarding and other now-banned interrogation techniques. On Friday, friends rallied to defend McCain against the White House official's cruel joke that his positions don't matter because he's dying anyway. If this is Washington's long goodbye to a sometimes favorite son, it's also a re-emergence of an old resentments and political fault lines that continue to split the nation. When we go to the spirit world, the idea, in our Songhua ceremonies, is that we release people, and we also have a process by which all resentments are released. People who attend these Songhua are asked to, release all their resentments, because these resentments hold a person back. When they're trying to move into the spirit world.
No question about that.
They hold the person back. And so we need to send the person, free the person so that they can go and leave the earth, leave the physical world. McCain, I think, is going to be around even after he exits his physical body, because he's going to have a lot of resentments tying him to this world, unfortunately. So perhaps no one should have expected anything less from the 81-year-old senator who can so I lost my place there, who can be crotchety and cantankerous, but is also seen by many, both in and out of politics, as an American hero, flaws and all. Well, he was a prisoner of war during the Vietnam War, and he's been using that as a political capital for a long time, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. I voted for John McCain and Sarah Palin for president, but at the time I did not know that he had written the National Defense Directive, giving the power of the President of the United States the same kind of power that Stalin had in Russia.
Mm-hmm. You're referring to the NDA, the National Defense Authorization Act, yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. This is the most un-American thing that ever happened in my lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, John McCain did not deserve to be recognized as an American hero. He was a traitor to the freedom of America.
Mm-hmm.
It's the most oppressive law ever on the books. He hid it in a one-paragraph sentence or paragraph in a $55,000 defense initiative that had to be passed. After the passage of that bill, some of the press actually asked people if they knew that this defense initiative was in the bill, and at least one congressman stood up and said, "Absolutely not." He says, "It's a 50,000 pages, and they couldn't read every word in it." So the senator was honest about his voting for it, but not knowing that John McCain had written this into that defense initiative. This gave unlimited power to the President of the United States to say, "I don't like Jack, I don't like Tim, put them in jail, maybe we'll talk to them 5 years. No lawyer, no representation. The only thing they would know is that Tim and Jack left this church a few minutes ago, and nobody knows where they are."
Yeah.
That,
yeah. What Jack is saying is
un-American
true.
as it gets.
Yeah, what Jack is saying is true. We don't have time now in the remaining 3 minutes of this broadcast this morning, but the problem with the National Defense Authorization Act is very serious because it completely undermines the basic ideals and basic principles of democracy and the founding principles of America. But we don't have time to go into all that this morning, I'm afraid. We only have a couple minutes left. But a couple of things that we might go into here before we have to sign off. In London, they have more and more acid attacks. Yeah, well, at least they're not guns, right? But it doesn't matter though, and people don't have the tools with which to defend themselves.
They wouldn't be attacking anybody if they knew they had guns to defend themselves. They wouldn't. The bad guys don't do that. They don't go to where the strength is.
A screaming man runs into Quick Fit garage shouting, "I've been attacked with acid," in an upmarket London suburb. Scotland Yard said the victim was approached by two suspects who threw a noxious substance at him before stealing his mobile phone. So this was basically this was armed robbery. A man burst into a car garage at an upmarket London suburb screaming that he had been attacked with acid. Police, firefighters, and paramedics were called to Quick Fit in Whetstone, North London, this morning after reports a man had a noxious substance thrown at him. A supervisor in the shop told This is local London. The distressed victim repeatedly said he had been attacked with acid and that he constantly washed his face until emergency services arrived. Police said they understand the man was approached by two suspects who threw a noxious substance at him before stealing his mobile phone. Video and pictures show the garage has been surrounded by police tape with the surrounding roads also shut. We poured water on his face and he kept saying, "Call an ambulance, I've been attacked with acid." We took him into the washroom area and stripped his top off and washed him down with water while police were on their way. So yeah, London is having these problems because people cannot defend themselves. Meanwhile, the mayor there is going after fast food. Why not?
Going after. There's one more comment I'd like to make.
Okay. All right.
This is God resides in the heart of all men. I believe I can prove this to almost anyone. As humans spread across this planet, some civilizations forgot that there were humans in other areas, but they all believed in a higher power.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the only way that this could have happened is if God resides in the heart of all men. The Native American Indians, I believe, describe God for me as well as could be. They called their God the Great Spirit. I can think of no better definition of God than the Great Spirit that I believe is in the heart of all men everywhere.
All right, that's wonderful last words from Jack Harris this morning. Thank you very much, Jack. And have a nice day today. It's going to be a rather rainy day today, but get out into nature anyway because rain is also good for you. Don't catch cold though.
Everything on this planet, every bird, every animal, every plant needs water. Rain is the breath of life on the planet Earth.
Okay. Thank you for joining us this morning. God bless, Godspeed, and may His kingdom come.